Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Betrayal. Colonel Aaron Weaver adjusted his tactical vest as the Afghan sun beat down mercilessly on Forward Operating Base Chapman. At 34, he was the youngest full colonel in Delta Force history, a distinction earned through 15 years of unwavering dedication to his country and an almost supernatural ability to orchestrate complex military operations. His steel-gray eyes, which had seen more death than most men twice his age, held secrets that would never be declassified. Aaron's marriage to Samantha Higgins had been the stuff of fairy tales 7 years ago. She was a stunning blonde social worker from Virginia, with emerald eyes that seemed to promise forever. They'd met at a military charity gala where she was volunteering, and Aaron had been instantly captivated by her apparent compassion for veterans. Their son, 6-year-old Daniel Weaver, had Aaron's sharp intelligence and Samantha's striking features. What Samantha didn't know was that Aaron's deployments weren't just standard military tours. His Delta Force unit, codenamed Phantom, specialized in black operations that officially didn't exist. Aaron commanded a budget that would make small nations envious, with resources that extended far beyond conventional military channels. He had contacts in intelligence agencies, organized crime, and corporate boardrooms across 6 continents. Back home in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Samantha had been living a double life for the past 8 months. Her affair with Raphael Baxter, a smooth-talking personal trainer at the local gym, had started as flirtation but quickly escalated into something more sinister. Raphael, a former mixed martial arts fighter with a criminal record sealed by juvenile courts, had convinced Samantha that Aaron was just another grunt who would never amount to anything significant. Raphael's manipulation was calculated and cruel. He'd isolated Samantha from her friends, convinced her that Aaron didn't truly love her, and gradually turned her against her own husband. What made it worse was how he'd begun treating Daniel, Aaron's beloved son, with increasing hostility and psychological abuse. The boy had started having nightmares, but Samantha, blinded by Raphael's charm and lies, dismissed Daniel's fears as childhood imagination. The breaking point came when Raphael moved into Aaron's house, sleeping in Aaron's bed, and convincing Samantha to change the locks. He'd even gone so far as to throw away Aaron's personal belongings, including family photos and military commendations. But Raphael's greatest miscalculation was underestimating exactly who Aaron Weaver really was. Aaron's father, Herman Weaver, had been a respected police chief in their hometown of Fayetteville until his recent retirement. The family had military tradition running through their veins. Herman's father had served in Korea, and Aaron's younger brother, Nathan Weaver, was currently a Navy SEAL. The Weaver men were known for their loyalty, their protective nature, and their absolutely unforgiving response to betrayal. As Aaron completed his final patrol briefing, reviewing intelligence reports and coordinating with local Afghan forces, he had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to shatter. His satellite phone, reserved for emergency communications, remained silent in his tactical gear. The call that would change everything was still hours away. Meanwhile, Raphael was growing bolder in his disrespect. He'd begun telling Daniel that Aaron was never coming home, that he was Daniel's new daddy, and that the boy needed to forget about that loser soldier. When Daniel refused and cried for his real father, Raphael's temper would flare, leading to verbal abuse that was slowly escalating towards something darker. Samantha, once a caring mother, had become a stranger to her own son. Raphael's influence had poisoned her against Daniel, convincing her that the boy was disrespectful and needed discipline. She'd started seeing Daniel as an obstacle to her new relationship rather than the innocent child caught in an adult nightmare. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test every principle Aaron held dear and unleash a side of him that his enemies had learned to fear. Chapter 2. The Shattering. The call came at 0300 hours local time, just as Aaron was reviewing final mission parameters for what was supposed to be his last operation before rotating home. The satellite phone's harsh ring cut through the desert silence like a blade. "Your pathetic father is dead, soldier boy." Raphael's voice dripped with malicious joy through the encrypted line. "Heart attack last night." Guess the old cop couldn't handle knowing what a failure his son turned out to be. Aaron's blood turned to ice. His father had been in perfect health when they'd spoken 3 weeks ago. Herman Weaver was only 58, ran 5 miles every morning, and had the constitution of a man half his age. "Next is your son if he won't call me daddy," Raphael continued, his laughter echoing across the connection. Little Danny's been real stubborn about accepting his new family situation. Maybe he needs some stronger motivation. In the background, Aaron could hear his son's heartbroken sobs. "I want my real daddy. When is he coming home? Please, Mommy, when is Daddy coming home?" Then Samantha's voice, cold and venomous. "Stop crying, Daniel. Your father doesn't care about us anymore. Raphael is your family now. Don't contact us and mind your own business, Aaron," Samantha added, addressing the phone directly. "We've moved on. You should too." The line went dead. Aaron stood motionless in the Afghan darkness, his mind processing the information with the same calculated precision he applied to military operations. But beneath the surface, something primal and dangerous was awakening. Something that had been forged in 15 years of warfare and refined by countless black operations. His first call was to his intelligence contact, Major Emmanuel Henderson, who ran deep background checks for Delta Force operations. "I need everything on Raphael Baxter, civilian, likely mid-30s, Fort Bragg area. And I need it in 6 hours." His second call was to his father's longtime partner, Detective Ron Chambers of the Fayetteville PD. Ron's voice was thick with grief and suspicion when he answered. "Aaron, son, I'm so sorry. Herman just collapsed yesterday evening. The coroner's report won't be ready for days, but something doesn't feel right. Your father was in perfect health, and he'd been worried sick about something involving Samantha and Daniel." Aaron's jaw tightened. What kind of worry? He'd been asking questions around town. "Apparently, some guy's been seen around your house, and neighbors reported hearing shouting matches. Herman tried calling Samantha multiple times last week, but she wouldn't return his calls. The day before he died, he told me he was planning to drive down and check on Daniel personally." Aaron's tactical mind began connecting dots that painted a horrifying picture. His father hadn't died of natural causes. He'd been eliminated because he was getting too close to discovering the truth about what was happening to Daniel. Over the next 4 hours, Aaron made a series of calls that would have terrified anyone who understood the resources at his disposal. He contacted Dr. Ivan Moore, a forensic pathologist who owed him several favors from a classified operation in Eastern Europe. He reached out to Derek Henry, a former CIA operative who now ran a private investigation firm specializing in domestic surveillance. And most importantly, he called his brother Nathan, whose SEAL team was currently on standby for rapid deployment. "Brother," Nathan's voice was tight with controlled rage when Aaron explained the situation. "Tell me what you need. I need you to get to Fayetteville and secure Dad's body before they can cremate him. Use whatever authority you have to. And Nathan, if anyone tries to stop you, remember that this is family." Aaron's next move was perhaps the most chilling. He contacted Manuel Wolf, a former Delta operator who'd transitioned into what the military euphemistically called private security consulting. Manuel's services were expensive, completely illegal, and absolutely untraceable. "I need a full package," Aaron told Manuel over an encrypted channel. "Surveillance, intelligence gathering, and scenario preparation. Timeline is accelerated. Budget is unlimited." As dawn broke over the Afghan mountains, Aaron Weaver began planning what would become the most personal and ruthless operation of his career. But first, he had to get home without alerting Samantha and Raphael to his intentions. Aaron's commanding officer, General Roman Valencia, was an old family friend who'd served with Herman Weaver in the early days. When Aaron requested emergency leave, Valencia took one look at his expression and approved it without question. "Take whatever time you need, Colonel. And Aaron, if you need anything that isn't exactly regulation, you didn't hear it from me." As Aaron's military transport lifted off from Chapman, carrying him toward a reckoning 7 years in the making, he made one final call. This one was to Lester Piper, a federal judge who'd been Aaron's mentor at West Point and who still owed him for a favor involving his son's drug charges being quietly dismissed. "Judge, I need a family court injunction prepared, sealed, and ready for immediate execution. And I need it to be bulletproof. My son's life may depend on it." The plane banked toward home, carrying a man who had just transformed from husband and father into something far more dangerous. A Delta Force colonel with unlimited resources and absolutely nothing left to lose. Chapter 3: The Reconnaissance. Aaron's return to American soil was orchestrated with the precision of a military insertion. Instead of flying directly to Fort Bragg, he landed at a private airfield in Virginia, where Derek Henry was waiting with a nondescript sedan and a comprehensive intelligence briefing. "Your boy Nathan secured your father's body," Derek reported as they drove through the pre-dawn darkness. The preliminary examination by Dr. Moore found traces of digitalis in the blood sample, enough to trigger cardiac arrest in a healthy man. It's subtle, hard to detect unless you know what to look for, and completely untraceable after 48 hours. Aaron's hands clenched into fists. His father had been murdered. Raphael Baxter, Derek continued, handing over a thick folder, real name Raphael Santos Baxter. 29 years old, former amateur MMA fighter with a sealed juvenile record for assault. Here's where it gets interesting. He's not working alone. Aaron opened the file to find surveillance photos of Raphael meeting with a woman he didn't recognize. She was elegant, well-dressed, and clearly older than Raphael by at least a decade. "Meet Marguerite Sims," Derek explained. 42, wealthy divorcee, owns 3 gyms in the Carolinas. She's Raphael's financial backer and, according to our surveillance, his handler. This isn't just an affair, Aaron. It's a systematic operation designed to destroy your family and take everything you have. The pieces began falling into place. Raphael hadn't stumbled into Samantha's life by accident. He'd been deliberately placed there. The question was why. Marguerite lost her husband in a military training accident 8 years ago, Derek continued. Captain Edmund Barry, Marine Corps. The accident was later classified, but there are rumors it involved a Delta Force joint training exercise that went wrong. Marguerite has been nursing a grudge against special operations ever since. Aaron studied the photos with cold precision. This wasn't just adultery, it was revenge against the military, with his family as collateral damage. The revelation transformed his rage into something even more dangerous, calculated fury. They arrived at a safe house Derek had established 3 miles from Aaron's neighborhood. Manuel Wolf was already there, along with enough surveillance equipment to run a small intelligence operation. The walls were covered with photos, documents, and timeline charts that painted a comprehensive picture of the conspiracy against Aaron's family. "Your wife's been completely isolated," Manuel reported. "Raphael and Marguerite have systematically removed every support system she had. Her friends think she's been too busy to socialize. Her family believes she's happy with her new relationship, and your son's teachers at school have been told that daddy is deployed and mommy is stressed." Aaron examined surveillance photos of his own home. Photos that showed Raphael lounging in Aaron's recliner, wearing Aaron's clothes, and sleeping in Aaron's bed. But the most damning images showed Daniel. His vibrant, happy son now looked thin, frightened, and withdrawn. "The boy's been having accidents at school," Manuel continued grimly. "Wetting himself, panic attacks during nap time, aggressive behavior toward other children. The classic signs of psychological abuse. Raphael's been escalating his treatment of Daniel, probably trying to force the boy to break and accept him as a father figure." Aaron's training in psychological warfare told him exactly what was happening. Raphael was systematically breaking down a 6-year-old child's psyche, using techniques that bordered on torture. The fact that Samantha was allowing it made her equally culpable in Aaron's mind. "What about legal options?" Aaron asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't satisfy him. Derek shook his head. "Marguerite's lawyers have been busy. They've documented every deployment you've had, painted you as an absentee father, and they've got witnesses ready to testify that Samantha was emotionally abandoned by her military husband. Plus, with no physical evidence of abuse and Samantha supporting Raphael, family court would likely grant supervised visitation at best." Aaron's expression grew even colder. The legal system would fail his son just as it had failed so many others. But Colonel Aaron Weaver had resources that extended far beyond civilian courts. "Show me the real-time surveillance," Aaron ordered. Manuel activated a series of monitors displaying feeds from microcameras placed around Aaron's house and neighborhood. The images that appeared made Aaron's blood boil. Raphael was in Aaron's kitchen, cooking breakfast while wearing Aaron's favorite shirt. Samantha sat at the table, laughing at something Raphael said. And Daniel, sweet, innocent Daniel, sat in the corner, picking at his food with the hollowed-out expression of a broken child. As they watched, Raphael walked over to Daniel and grabbed the boy's chin roughly, forcing Daniel to look at him. "What do you say when Daddy makes you breakfast?" Raphael demanded. Daniel's lower lip trembled. "Thank you, Raphael. That's not my name anymore, is it, Danny?" The 6-year-old's eyes filled with tears, but he whispered, "Thank you, Daddy." Raphael smiled with satisfaction and ruffled Daniel's hair in a gesture that was both possessive and threatening. "Good boy. See how easy it is when you listen." Aaron stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Derek and Manuel had worked with Aaron long enough to recognize the signs. The colonel was moving from intelligence gathering to operational planning. "I want full electronic surveillance on all of them," Aaron ordered. "Every phone call, every text message, every email. I want to know what they're planning, what they're afraid of, and what they care about most. I want financial records, travel patterns, and psychological profiles." "And then?" Manuel asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Aaron's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. "Then I'm going to destroy them so completely that they'll wish they'd never heard the name Weaver. But first, I'm going to get my son back." As Aaron studied the surveillance feeds, watching his child suffer in what used to be a loving home, he began formulating a plan that would combine his Delta Force training, his Black Operations resources, and his absolute refusal to forgive anyone who harmed his family. The reconnaissance phase was complete. Now the real operation would begin. Chapter 4: Intelligence Gathering and Pressure Points. Aaron spent the next 72 hours conducting what he privately termed deep reconnaissance, the kind of intelligence gathering that would have impressed his CIA contacts and terrified his targets if they'd known the scope of what he was uncovering. Dr. Ivan Moore's full autopsy report on Herman Weaver confirmed the digitalis poisoning, but more importantly, it provided a timeline. Herman had died approximately 6 hours after his last known contact with Samantha, during which neighbors reported seeing him leave her house, looking upset and determined. Security footage from a nearby gas station showed Herman driving away from Aaron's neighborhood at 4:23 p.m., and he was found dead in his apartment at 10:15 p.m. "Your father discovered something that night," Dr. Moore explained during their encrypted video call. "The concentration of digitalis suggests he was poisoned shortly after leaving your house. Someone followed him home." Aaron's jaw tightened. His father had died because he tried to protect Daniel. Manuel's surveillance operation had expanded into a full intelligence network. Hidden cameras now covered every entrance to Aaron's house, Raphael's gym, Marguerite's businesses, and even the school Daniel attended. What they discovered painted an even darker picture than Aaron had imagined. Raphael wasn't just psychologically abusing Daniel, he was documenting it. Hidden cameras in Raphael's gym revealed him reviewing video footage of Daniel's discipline sessions with Marguerite, discussing techniques for breaking the boy's resistance and accelerating the acceptance process. "They're treating your son like a military prisoner undergoing interrogation," Derek observed grimly as they reviewed the footage. Raphael's using textbook psychological warfare techniques: isolation, degradation, fear, and forced dependency. But the most damning evidence came from intercepted communications between Marguerite and an unknown contact. The encrypted messages, decoded by Nathan's SEAL Team cyber specialists, revealed the true scope of the conspiracy. Phase 3 complete, one message read. Primary target eliminated. Secondary target showing expected resistance. Recommend escalation of pressure protocols. Another message, sent just hours after Herman's death, was even more chilling. Cleanup successful. No evidence trail. Subject remains unaware of operational scope. Proceed with asset extraction timeline. Aaron realized they weren't just trying to steal his family. They were planning to disappear with Daniel entirely. His response was swift and merciless. Using his Delta Force contacts, Aaron initiated what he called pressure point mapping, identifying everything that Marguerite and Raphael valued and beginning systematic attacks on their foundations. Aaron's first target was Marguerite's business empire. Through a series of anonymous tips to health inspectors, fire marshals, and tax auditors, all 3 of her gyms were simultaneously hit with violations that would cost hundreds of thousands to resolve. But Aaron wasn't finished. Using his contacts in military intelligence, Aaron discovered that Marguerite's wealth came largely from her deceased husband's life insurance policy, a policy that had been paid out despite suspicious circumstances surrounding Captain Barry's death. Aaron arranged for that case to be quietly reopened by military investigators. Financial pressure is just the beginning, Aaron explained to his team. I want them to feel hunted, paranoid, constantly looking over their shoulders. When people are afraid, they make mistakes. Raphael proved to be an easier target. Aaron's background check revealed that Raphael's sealed juvenile record involved assault charges against a younger child, information that would destroy his relationship with Samantha if she knew. But Aaron had something better planned. Through Manuel's contacts in the MMA community, Aaron arranged for Raphael to be randomly selected for enhanced drug testing by the State Athletic Commission. The test would reveal Raphael's extensive use of anabolic steroids, drugs that were known to cause aggressive behavior and mood swings. More importantly, the testing would happen publicly, humiliating Raphael in front of the community where he'd built his reputation. But Aaron's masterstroke was more personal. Using deep psychological profiles compiled by military psychologists, Aaron identified Raphael's greatest weakness, his desperate need for respect and admiration. Raphael's entire identity was built around being seen as a dominant, successful man. Aaron began systematically destroying that image. Anonymous posts appeared on social media exposing Raphael's criminal record, his steroid use, and his pattern of targeting military wives. Local newspapers received tips about Raphael's relationship coaching business, which turned out to be targeting vulnerable women for financial exploitation. Within days, Raphael's carefully constructed persona was crumbling. He's starting to panic, Manuel reported, showing Aaron surveillance footage of Raphael pacing frantically in Marguerite's office. His gym membership is down 40%, 2 major sponsors dropped him, and someone spray-painted wife stealer on his car last night. Aaron smiled coldly. Fear makes people reactive instead of strategic. Keep the pressure increasing. Meanwhile, Aaron was gathering intelligence on Samantha that broke his heart while hardening his resolve. Intercepted communications revealed that she was planning to take Daniel and disappear with Raphael within 2 weeks. Marguerite had prepared new identities for all of them, complete with fake documentation and offshore bank accounts. But the most devastating discovery was a recorded conversation between Samantha and Raphael discussing Daniel's final conditioning. The boy needs to completely forget about Aaron, Samantha said on the recording, her voice cold and calculating. Whatever it takes. If he won't accept you willingly, then we need to consider more extreme measures. I can break him, Raphael replied confidently. Give me 1 week of intensive sessions, and he'll never mention his father again. Aaron played the recording 3 times, each listening making him more certain that the woman he'd married no longer existed. The Samantha he'd loved had been replaced by someone willing to psychologically torture their own child to maintain her fantasy relationship. As Aaron finalized his plans for the next phase of his operation, he made a decision that would have shocked his former self, but felt completely natural to the man he'd become. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, and no mercy. His family had been attacked, his father had been murdered, and his son was being systematically destroyed. The people responsible would pay a price that would serve as a warning to anyone who might consider threatening a Weaver family member in the future. The intelligence gathering phase was complete. Now it was time for direct action. Chapter 5: Psychological Warfare Unleashed. Aaron's psychological warfare campaign began at 0300 hours on a Tuesday morning with the precision of a military operation and the ruthlessness of a man who had lost everything he held sacred. Marguerite Sims woke to the sound of her home security system screaming an intruder alert. When she rushed to her control panel, every camera feed showed the same image, a photo of her deceased husband, Captain Edmund Barry, with the words "he knows" written in red across his face. When she called her security company, they found no sign of forced entry and no explanation for how the images had been placed on her cameras. But that was only the beginning. Throughout the day, Marguerite received a series of increasingly disturbing messages. First, her business manager called to report that someone had filed a formal complaint with the state attorney general's office alleging insurance fraud in Captain Barry's death. Then her lawyer called to warn her that military investigators were requesting all records related to her husband's training accident. By evening, Marguerite was receiving phone calls from numbers that couldn't be traced, with only dead silence on the other end. But the caller ID always showed the same thing: Edmund Berry calling. Raphael's psychological assault was even more targeted and devastating. Aaron had studied Raphael's psychology extensively and identified his core weakness, the desperate need to be perceived as an alpha male-dominant figure. Aaron's attack was designed to systematically destroy that self-image in the most humiliating way possible. Raphael arrived at his gym to find a crowd gathered around something posted on the front door. It was his juvenile arrest record, enlarged and laminated, with a headline reading, "Child Beater Teaches Self-Defense." Below that was his steroid test results and a detailed medical analysis of how steroids affected brain chemistry and increased violent tendencies. When Raphael tore down the posters, identical copies appeared on every car in the parking lot within an hour. But Aaron's cruelest psychological weapon was using Raphael's own MMA community against him. Through Manuel's contacts, Aaron arranged for several of Raphael's former training partners to receive anonymous packages containing evidence of Raphael's steroid use, his targeting of military wives, and his criminal history. The reaction was swift and devastating. Raphael's former sparring partners confronted him publicly at the gym, calling him a fraud and a predator. When Raphael tried to fight back, his steroid-compromised emotional control caused him to lose his temper spectacularly, confirming everything they'd been told about his chemical-induced aggression. The confrontation was recorded and uploaded to social media within hours. Aaron watched the video with cold satisfaction. Raphael's carefully constructed reputation was crumbling in real time, and more importantly, his psychological stability was beginning to fracture. But Aaron's most sophisticated psychological operation was targeted at Samantha herself. Through deep analysis of her communication patterns and behavioral psychology, Aaron had identified Samantha's core psychological drivers: her need for security, her fear of abandonment, and her desperate desire to be perceived as a good mother. Aaron's campaign was designed to attack all three simultaneously. First, Aaron arranged for Samantha to receive a series of seemingly random encounters that would plant seeds of doubt about Raphael. A concerned mother at Daniel's school mentioned seeing Raphael arguing aggressively with children at a playground. A grocery store clerk recognized Raphael from a news story about domestic violence, a story Aaron had planted in a local paper. A pharmacist accidentally asked if Raphael was still taking anger management medication. Each encounter was carefully scripted to seem natural while reinforcing the same message: Raphael was dangerous and unstable. Meanwhile, Aaron was working on a more direct approach to Samantha's psychology. Through Derek's surveillance network, Aaron learned that Samantha had been researching how to help children adjust to new fathers and signs of childhood trauma online. Her search history suggested she was becoming increasingly worried about Daniel's behavior changes. Aaron exploited this perfectly. Samantha began receiving anonymous packages containing child psychology articles that described the exact symptoms Daniel was exhibiting, with certain passages highlighted in red. The articles described psychological abuse, forced loyalty conflicts, and the long-term damage caused by replacement father figures who used intimidation tactics. The packages always included a handwritten note: a real mother would protect her child. Aaron could monitor Samantha's emotional state through surveillance feeds, and he watched with cold satisfaction as she became increasingly agitated and uncertain. She started questioning Raphael about his interactions with Daniel, began researching child therapists, and most importantly, started pulling back from Raphael's increasingly demanding behavior. The psychological pressure on all three targets was creating exactly the effect Aaron had planned: paranoia, internal conflict, and rapidly escalating stress that was causing them to turn on each other. Intercepted communications showed Marguerite beginning to question whether the operation was worth the risk, Raphael becoming increasingly volatile and difficult to control, and Samantha starting to wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake. But Aaron's most devastating psychological weapon was still to come. On Friday evening, as Raphael and Samantha sat in Aaron's living room discussing their plans to disappear with Daniel, the lights suddenly cut out. When they came back on 30 seconds later, every framed photo in the house had been replaced with images of Aaron in full military gear, his Delta Force unit, and most chillingly, surveillance photos of Raphael and Marguerite meeting in secret. The message was clear: Aaron knew everything. He was watching everything, and he was coming. When Raphael called Marguerite in a panic, her phone went straight to voicemail. Marguerite was dealing with her own crisis. Every device in her house was playing a recording of her husband's voice saying, "Marguerite, why did you let them kill me?" on continuous loop. As Aaron watched the surveillance feeds from his safe house, he saw 3 people who had been confident conspirators 12 hours ago now reduced to paranoid, terrified individuals who were beginning to suspect that they were facing an enemy far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The psychological warfare phase was complete. All 3 targets were now emotionally compromised, strategically isolated, and psychologically primed for the final phase of Aaron's operation. But first, Aaron had to extract his son from immediate danger. Because the intelligence he'd gathered suggested that Raphael's psychological breakdown was about to turn violent, and Daniel was the most likely target for his rage. Chapter 6. The Extraction. Aaron's most dangerous operation began at dawn on Saturday morning, when surveillance feeds showed Raphael's psychological state deteriorating rapidly. The man was pacing Aaron's house like a caged animal, screaming at Samantha about psychological warfare and demanding to know if she'd told anyone about their plans. "He's about to snap," Manuel observed, monitoring Raphael's stress indicators through remote biometric sensors they'd planted. Heart rate elevated, erratic movement patterns, and he's been awake for 36 hours straight. Classic pre-violence behavior. Aaron made the decision that would define everything that followed. Daniel had to be extracted from that house immediately, regardless of legal consequences. "Nathan, I need you to position yourself at Daniel's school," Aaron ordered his brother. "If this goes wrong, you get Daniel and disappear until I can handle the situation." "Understood," Nathan replied grimly. "What about local law enforcement?" "Detective Chambers is standing by, but officially, he doesn't know anything about this operation." Plausible deniability for everyone. Aaron's extraction plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. He would use Raphael's paranoia and psychological instability to create a situation where Raphael would remove Daniel from the house himself, making the extraction look like Raphael's own decision. The operation began with a single phone call to Samantha's cell phone at 6:47 a.m. "Samantha," Aaron's voice was calm, controlled, and absolutely terrifying in its quiet intensity. "You have 1 hour to get my son away from that man before I come to get him myself." "Aaron." Samantha's voice was shaky, frightened. "How did you? We changed the locks. How are you?" "I know about Raphael. I know about Marguerite. I know about my father. And I know about the plan to disappear with Daniel." Aaron's voice never rose above conversational level, but each word carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You have 1 hour." The line went dead. Aaron watched through surveillance feeds as Samantha ran to Raphael in a panic, showing him the call log. Raphael's reaction was exactly what Aaron had predicted: explosive rage combined with paranoid fear. "He's bluffing," Raphael shouted, but his body language showed he wasn't convinced. How could he know about any of this? He's stuck overseas. What Raphael didn't know was that Aaron was less than 2 miles away, and had been for the past 4 days. Aaron's next move was designed to escalate Raphael's paranoia into action. Through Manuel's technical expertise, every device in the house began receiving the same text message simultaneously: 1 hour. "Then I'm coming home." Raphael's response was swift and predictable. He grabbed Daniel from his bedroom, threw some clothes into a bag, and announced they were leaving immediately for Marguerite's cabin in the mountains. "We'll stay there until this blows over," Raphael told Samantha as he roughly handled the terrified 6-year-old. "Your ex-husband wants to play games? Let him find us." This was exactly what Aaron had been manipulating Raphael toward. The mountain cabin was isolated, defensible, and most importantly, it removed Daniel from populated areas where civilians might be caught in the crossfire of what was about to happen. As Raphael's truck pulled out of the driveway with Samantha and Daniel inside, 3 separate vehicles began following at discrete distances. Aaron was in the lead vehicle, Nathan was in the second, and Manuel brought up the rear with a technical team that could handle any electronic surveillance or communication needs. The drive to Marguerite's mountain cabin took 90 minutes, giving Aaron time to coordinate with assets he'd positioned throughout the area. 2 former Delta operatives were already in place near the cabin, and Dr. Ivan Moore was standing by at a medical facility 30 minutes away in case Daniel needed immediate care after his traumatic experiences. Aaron's intelligence indicated that Marguerite was already at the cabin, and that she brought additional security, 2 private contractors with questionable backgrounds and expensive equipment. This was no longer a domestic dispute. It was a military-style operation with his son as a hostage. As Raphael's truck climbed into the mountains, Aaron made a decision that crossed a line he'd never thought he'd cross as an American soldier. He was about to conduct a black operation on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens. But they had murdered his father and were torturing his son. In Aaron's mind, they had forfeited any right to legal protection. The mountain terrain around Marguerite's cabin was perfect for the kind of operation Aaron had trained for his entire adult life. Dense forest provided concealment, multiple approach routes offered tactical flexibility, and the isolation meant no witnesses or civilian casualties. Aaron's assault team took positions around the cabin as Raphael's truck arrived. Through high-powered scopes, they could see Daniel being pulled from the vehicle, the boy's face streaked with tears and his small body trembling with fear. Rules of engagement. Aaron spoke into his radio. Primary objective is extraction of the child unharmed. Secondary objective is capture of all adult targets for interrogation. Lethal force authorized if the child is threatened. Copy that, Colonel, came the responses from his team. Aaron could see Raphael through his scope, waving a handgun around as he shouted at Marguerite about psychological warfare and military tactics. The man was clearly having a complete breakdown, which made him unpredictable and extremely dangerous. But it was what Aaron saw next that made his blood run cold and triggered the most violent response of his career. Raphael grabbed Daniel by the arm and shook him violently, screaming, "This is all your fault. Your daddy thinks he can scare me? I'll show him what happens when people try to scare Raphael Baxter." Then Raphael pulled out a knife. Aaron's voice cut across the radio frequency with absolute authority. "All units, weapons free. Execute, execute, execute." The assault on the mountain cabin began with the precision of a Delta Force operation and the fury of a father whose child was in immediate mortal danger. Within seconds, Aaron Weaver would transition from psychological warfare to direct action, and Raphael Baxter would discover exactly who he had chosen as an enemy. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Unleashed. The assault began at 11:23 a.m. with a coordinated attack that demonstrated why Aaron Weaver was considered one of the most dangerous men in the U.S. military. Aaron's team had positioned themselves in a perfect tactical formation around the mountain cabin. Nathan approached from the north with suppressed weapons. Manuel covered the east and west escape routes, and 2 Delta operatives Aaron had called in as favors sealed the southern approach. Aaron himself took the direct assault position, his scope trained on Raphael's position near the cabin's main window. "I want the boy extracted first." Aaron's voice was cold and professional over the radio. "Everything else is secondary." The opening move was a flashbang grenade thrown through the cabin's back window, followed immediately by Nathan's entry through the rear door. The explosion and blinding light sent everyone inside into panic mode, but Aaron's team moved with the precision of a Swiss watch. Raphael's first instinct was exactly what Aaron had predicted. He grabbed Daniel as a human shield, pressing the knife to the terrified child's throat. But Raphael had made a fatal tactical error. He positioned himself in front of the main window, giving Aaron a clear shot. "Let the boy go, Raphael." Aaron's voice came through a tactical speaker. "You're surrounded by people who kill for a living. Your only chance is to release my son." "Aaron Weaver," Raphael screamed, his voice cracking with fear and rage. "I knew you'd come, but if you try anything, I'll cut his throat." Samantha was cowering in the corner, finally seeing Raphael for what he truly was, a dangerous predator having a complete psychological breakdown. Marguerite was reaching for a weapon when Nathan's red laser appeared on her forehead. "I wouldn't," Nathan advised calmly. Aaron's psychological profile of Raphael had prepared him for this moment. The man was a coward at his core, someone who preyed on the vulnerable but crumbled when facing real opposition. Aaron's next words were designed to completely destroy Raphael's remaining composure. "Raphael, you killed my father, you've been torturing my son, and now you're holding a knife to a 6-year-old's throat. Do you really think there's any scenario where you walk away from this alive?" Raphael's hand began shaking. The knife wavered against Daniel's neck. "You're just a grunt," Raphael screamed. "Just another stupid soldier. I'm not afraid of you." Aaron's response was delivered in the same conversational tone he might use to order coffee. "Raphael, I'm Colonel Aaron Weaver, Delta Force. I've killed more men than you've met in your entire life. I've toppled governments, eliminated terrorist cells, and conducted operations that will never be declassified. And right now, you're holding the only thing in the world that I truly care about." The cabin fell silent except for Daniel's quiet sobbing. "So here's what's going to happen," Aaron continued. "You're going to put down that knife and step away from my son. Then you're going to answer some questions about who else was involved in this operation. And if you cooperate, I might let you live." Raphael's psychological breakdown accelerated. Years of steroid abuse, combined with the stress of the past week and the realization that he was facing a real predator, caused his grip on reality to snap completely. "No," Raphael screamed, raising the knife higher. "I'm in control here. I'm the one with." The sentence ended abruptly as Aaron's sniper shot took Raphael through the right shoulder, spinning him away from Daniel and dropping the knife. Nathan was through the door and covering Daniel before Raphael hit the ground. "Daddy!" Daniel screamed, running toward Aaron's voice. "I'm here, son," Aaron called as he moved toward the cabin. "Everything's going to be okay now." But the operation was far from over. Marguerite still posed a threat, and Aaron needed information about the full scope of the conspiracy against his family. Marguerite tried to negotiate. "Colonel Weaver, this was all Raphael's idea. I was just trying to help him get his life together. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." Aaron entered the cabin with his weapon trained on Marguerite, his expression absolutely cold. Daniel ran to him, and Aaron lifted his son with one arm while keeping his rifle pointed at Marguerite with the other. "Marguerite Sims," Aaron said calmly, "you financed a conspiracy to murder my father, kidnap my son, and destroy my family. You think claiming ignorance is going to save you?" Raphael was writhing on the ground, screaming about his wounded shoulder, but Aaron ignored him completely. His attention was focused on Marguerite, who was beginning to realize that her money and lawyers weren't going to help her in this situation. "What do you want?" Marguerite asked, her voice shaking. "I want names," Aaron replied. "I want to know everyone who was involved in this operation. I want to know who else you've targeted. And I want to know exactly how you plan to make my family disappear." Samantha, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. "Aaron, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I never meant for Daniel to get hurt," Raphael said. "Samantha," Aaron's voice cut through her words like ice. "You allowed another man to psychologically torture our son. You helped plan to kidnap him. You participated in isolating him from everyone who loved him. There is nothing you can say that will change what you've done." Aaron's tone made it clear that Samantha was no longer his wife in any meaningful sense. She was a co-conspirator who had betrayed their child. Over the next 2 hours, Aaron conducted interrogations that would have impressed CIA professionals. Marguerite, facing the choice between cooperation and whatever Aaron might do to uncooperative prisoners, revealed the full scope of their operation. The conspiracy had targeted 12 military families over the past 5 years, using variations of the same pattern: identify deployed service members, seduce their wives, isolate them from support systems, and ultimately steal their assets and children. Aaron's family had been specifically targeted because Marguerite blamed Delta Force for her husband's death. "We were going to take Daniel to South America," Marguerite confessed. "New identities, new life. He would have forgotten about you eventually." Aaron's expression never changed, but Nathan noticed his brother's hands clench slightly. "And my father?" Raphael panicked. Marguerite admitted. "Your father was asking too many questions, threatening to call in federal investigators. Raphael said it was just supposed to make him sick, not, we never meant for him to die." Aaron absorbed this information with the emotional control of a professional soldier, but inside, his rage was building towards something that would terrify anyone who truly understood what he was capable of. As emergency vehicles finally arrived, Aaron had allowed Detective Chambers to discover the situation after the immediate threats were neutralized. Aaron made a series of decisions that would define the rest of his life. Raphael and Marguerite would face justice, but not the kind available in civilian courts. Aaron had contacts and resources that could ensure they disappeared into systems where their money and lawyers would be useless. Samantha would lose all rights to Daniel and would spend the rest of her life knowing that she had chosen a monster over her own child. And Aaron would rebuild his life around the only thing that truly mattered, protecting and raising his son. But first, there would be one final phase of his operation, ensuring that the message was sent to anyone else who might consider targeting military families. Chapter 8. Justice Beyond the Law. 3 weeks after the mountain cabin confrontation, Aaron Weaver sat in a secure conference room at Fort Bragg, surrounded by men whose ranks and authority were classified above most government officials' clearance levels. The meeting had been arranged through channels that didn't officially exist, discussing an operation that would never appear in any military records. General Roman Valencia opened the meeting with a statement that defined everything that followed. "Gentlemen, we have a domestic terrorism situation that threatens military families nationwide. Colonel Weaver has uncovered a conspiracy that has operated with impunity for 5 years. The civilian justice system is inadequate to address the scope of this threat." Aaron presented his evidence methodically. 12 military families targeted, millions in assets stolen, children psychologically traumatized, and in his father's case, murder. The conspiracy had operated by exploiting the legal system's inability to handle complex psychological warfare tactics and the reluctance of civilian courts to understand military family dynamics. "The pattern shows sophisticated planning and execution," Aaron explained. "Marguerite Sims has been running this operation like a military campaign, targeting specific types of families and using psychological manipulation techniques that border on torture." Major Emmanuel Henderson, representing military intelligence, added, "Our investigation suggests international connections. The false identity documents and offshore banking suggest this operation was part of a larger effort to compromise military personnel." What Aaron didn't say, but everyone in the room understood, was that this meeting wasn't about conventional justice. Raphael Baxter and Marguerite Sims were beyond the reach of civilian courts. They had resources, lawyers, and enough legal cover to escape meaningful punishment through normal channels. General Valencia made the decision that Aaron had been hoping for. This is now classified as a national security threat. "Colonel Weaver, you have authorization to resolve this situation using any means necessary." Aaron's smile was cold and satisfied. He now had official authorization for what he'd been planning to do anyway. Raphael Baxter disappeared from the federal holding facility where he was awaiting trial 3 days after the meeting. The official report stated that he had been transferred to another facility for security reasons, but no record of the transfer existed. Raphael simply vanished into the black operations system that Aaron knew better than most civilians understood. Aaron's contacts in the intelligence community ensured that Raphael was placed in a facility where child abusers received very special attention from both guards and fellow inmates. Raphael would survive, but his remaining years would be spent in constant fear and pain, a fitting punishment for what he'd done to Daniel. Marguerite Sims faced a more complex form of justice. Aaron's investigation had revealed that her wealth came from insurance fraud related to her husband's death, and that she'd been systematically targeting military families as revenge for a training accident that had been Captain Barry's own fault. But civilian prosecutors were struggling to build cases that would result in meaningful sentences. Aaron solved this problem through his international contacts. Marguerite's offshore accounts mysteriously transferred their contents to a fund supporting military families affected by deployment stress. Her business assets were seized through IRS audits that revealed decades of tax evasion. Her properties were condemned through housing inspections that found environmental violations. Within 6 weeks, Marguerite went from wealthy socialite to homeless and bankrupt. But Aaron's cruelest touch was arranging for her to be charged in an international court with human trafficking, a charge that carried much harsher sentences than anything available in the U.S. system. The last Aaron heard, Marguerite was serving 25 years in a South American prison where conditions were considerably less comfortable than American facilities. But Aaron's most personal justice was reserved for Samantha. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Aaron's lawyers, the best military legal experts available, presented evidence of Samantha's conspiracy to kidnap Daniel, her participation in psychological abuse, and her role in Herman Weaver's murder. Samantha's attempts to claim she was manipulated fell apart when Aaron's team presented recordings of her discussing breaking Daniel's resistance and planning his disappearance. Judge Lester Piper, Aaron's mentor from West Point, awarded Aaron full custody with a restraining order that prevented Samantha from any contact with Daniel. But Aaron's real revenge was more subtle and devastating. Using his intelligence resources, Aaron ensured that everyone in Samantha's social circle learned exactly what she had done. Her job at the social services agency ended when supervisors discovered she had participated in child abuse. Her family disowned her when they learned she had helped plan their grandson's kidnapping. Her friends abandoned her when they realized she had chosen a criminal over her own child. Samantha found herself completely isolated, unemployed, and facing criminal charges that would follow her for the rest of her life. Aaron's final message to her was delivered through her lawyer. You chose your side. Now live with the consequences. Aaron's justice extended beyond the immediate conspirators. His investigation had identified 3 other men who had worked with Raphael in targeting military families. All 3 found themselves facing various forms of Aaron's attention: IRS audits, immigration investigations, and criminal charges that appeared to come from nowhere, but were actually the result of Aaron's methodical intelligence gathering. The message was clear to anyone who might consider targeting military families. Colonel Aaron Weaver had unlimited resources and an absolutely unforgiving memory. As Aaron concluded his justice operations, he made one final decision that surprised even his closest allies. He requested transfer to a Pentagon position that would allow him to create a new program, a rapid response system for protecting military families from domestic threats. We can't prevent every attack, Aaron explained to General Valencia, but we can ensure that anyone who targets our families faces consequences that go far beyond civilian law enforcement. The program was approved immediately and given unlimited funding. Aaron's last act in the immediate aftermath was visiting his father's grave with Daniel. The boy, who was slowly recovering from his trauma through intensive therapy, placed flowers on his grandfather's headstone. Daddy, Daniel asked quietly, are the bad people ever coming back? Aaron knelt beside his son, his voice gentle but absolutely certain. No, Daniel. They're never coming back. And no one will ever hurt you again. As they walked away from the cemetery, Aaron reflected on how completely his life had changed. The man who had once believed in forgiveness and legal justice had become something harder and more dangerous. But he felt no regret. Some betrayals were too deep for forgiveness. Some threats required responses beyond civilian law. And some people needed to learn that targeting a Weaver family member carried consequences that would follow them forever. The operation was complete, but Colonel Aaron Weaver's mission to protect military families was just beginning. Chapter 9: The New Foundation. 6 months after the mountain cabin confrontation, Aaron Weaver stood in his new home office, reviewing files for his Pentagon program that had already prevented 4 similar attacks on military families. The walls were decorated with photos of Daniel's soccer games, swimming lessons, and camping trips. Images of a boy slowly healing from trauma and rediscovering what childhood should feel like. Daniel, now 7 years old, showed remarkable resilience that reminded Aaron daily of the Weaver family strength. The boy still had occasional nightmares, but Dr. Ivan Moore's recommended therapist, Dr. Chelsea Bass, had worked wonders in helping Daniel process his experiences. More importantly, Daniel was learning to trust again, to feel safe again, and to understand that his father would always protect him. Daddy, Daniel said, bouncing into the office with a school report card, Mrs. Kane says I'm the best reader in my class. Aaron smiled, lifting his son onto his lap. That's because you're brilliant, just like your grandfather was. They had moved to a new house in Virginia, near Aaron's Pentagon assignment. The fresh start had been essential for both of them, a place without memories of Samantha's betrayal or Raphael's presence. Nathan had helped with the move, and Uncle Nathan remained a constant presence in Daniel's life, providing the kind of family stability that Aaron considered essential. Aaron's new position as Director of Family Security Operations gave him access to intelligence networks that monitored threats against military families nationwide. The program he'd created was already showing results. Suspected predators were identified early, vulnerable families received immediate support, and potential conspiracies were dismantled before they could cause damage. We've identified another situation in California, Derek Henry reported during their weekly briefing. Derek had accepted a permanent position with Aaron's program, finding the work more satisfying than private investigation. Single mother, deployed husband, suspicious new boyfriend with a criminal background. Classic pattern. Response team. Aaron asked, though he already knew the answer. Already in position. Manuel's handling surveillance. Local law enforcement is briefed, and we have family services standing by. This one will be resolved before it escalates. Aaron nodded with satisfaction. Each prevented attack validated his belief that military families needed protection beyond what civilian systems could provide. The broader justice Aaron had orchestrated continued to unfold. Raphael Baxter had been found dead in his prison cell 3 months earlier, officially a suicide, though Aaron suspected the other inmates had simply grown tired of his presence. Marguerite Sims remained in South American prison, and her international appeals for better conditions were consistently denied. Samantha had attempted to contact Daniel twice through intermediaries, but Aaron's legal protections held firm. She had been forced to relocate to another state after her participation in the conspiracy became widely known in North Carolina. Aaron felt no sympathy. She had made her choices and would live with the consequences. But Aaron's most important accomplishment was Daniel's recovery. The boy who had been withdrawn and fearful was now confident, happy, and secure in his father's love. Daniel played Little League baseball, excelled in school, and had developed a group of friends whose parents were all military families Aaron had personally vetted. "Dad," Daniel said during dinner that evening, "Tommy's dad is deploying next month. Will you make sure his family is safe while he's gone?" Aaron smiled at his son's understanding of his work. "Absolutely. That's what we do." Aaron had also rebuilt relationships with extended family and military friends who provided Daniel with a broader support network. Detective Ron Chambers had become an honorary grandfather figure. Herman Weaver's police colleagues regularly checked on Daniel, and Aaron's Delta Force team members made sure to visit whenever possible. The healing extended to Aaron himself. The rage that had driven his revenge operations had settled into a calm, determined vigilance. He slept better knowing that Daniel was safe, that threats were being monitored, and that justice had been served to those who had attacked his family. Aaron's final victory was perhaps the most satisfying. His program had been so successful that it was being expanded internationally, protecting American military families stationed overseas. The work gave him purpose beyond personal revenge. He was building something that would protect thousands of families from the kind of systematic attack his own family had endured. One evening, as Aaron tucked Daniel into bed, the boy asked a question that showed his remarkable maturity. "Daddy, do you miss Mommy?" Aaron considered his answer carefully. "I miss the person I thought she was, Daniel. But the real Samantha chose to hurt you, and I can never forgive that. You and I are a family now, and that's enough." Daniel nodded seriously. "I like our family better. You always keep me safe." "Always," Aaron promised. "No matter what." As Aaron left Daniel's room, he reflected on how completely his life had been reconstructed. The man who had once believed in legal justice and forgiveness had become someone who understood that some threats required responses beyond civilian systems. The husband who had once trusted completely now understood that betrayal could come from anyone, even those closest to you. But most importantly, the father who had once taken his family's safety for granted now dedicated every day to ensuring that Daniel would grow up protected, loved, and secure. Aaron's phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. "New intelligence suggests another group targeting military families in Texas. Your program's reputation is spreading. They're getting scared." Aaron smiled coldly as he typed his response. "Good. Fear is the only thing that keeps predators away from our families." Standing in his home office, surrounded by evidence of his son's happy, normal childhood, Aaron Weaver felt a satisfaction that went deeper than revenge. He had not only destroyed those who had attacked his family, he had built something that would protect countless others. The boy who had been terrorized was now safe. The conspirators who had seemed untouchable had been eliminated. The military families who might have been targeted were now protected. And Colonel Aaron Weaver, the man who never forgave and never forgot, had found his true mission, ensuring that no family would ever suffer what his had endured. In the end, Aaron had not just won. He had created a legacy that would protect the innocent long after his own war was over. That was the most complete victory of all.